Hello, anybody who's watching this, welcome to my reaction to Yakuza is Stupid and Beautiful and I Love It by Super Eyepatch Wolf. This video is sponsored by Super X Crazy, who donated to ask me to react to it through the donation in the description below 6 minutes ago. Oh, 7 minutes ago. While I was recording a different video. So you got two shoutouts because, who cares? But yeah, I actually wanted to make a different Super Eyepatch Wolf video for a bit. Not this one, but I might as well. I wanted to watch, another video was recommended to me about him building a PC with Dell or something like that. I don't remember the name of it. It doesn't matter that much. But before we begin, if you want to help out the channel, there's the donation in the description below, a one-time donation link. But if you want these videos early, there's a Patreon where I will upload every video I record right after I'm done with the recording session, which could mean one video, could mean a day early, could mean 2 months with the watch-alongs. I assume that's what's gonna happen if I'm gonna watch JoJo all the way. But you can also just like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want. Let's begin.
Yakuza is a series about hardship. It's a series about characters trapped in a system struggling to break free.
I'm looking at the volume, sir.
It's about doing the right thing when the right thing seems impossible, about growing old, about forming connections and discovering what really matters in life. Of course, you wouldn't know that from any of the footage I've been using because Yakuza is also one of the most deceptive video game series in existence.
And I love that.
A title of wild clashing tones that...
It's like when a thing can have like very, not necessarily dark undertones, but like an important message behind it while being wrapped in this kind of surreal almost action epic, I don't know, something like that. It's beautiful. And I learned that with the Maxor's video about Yakuza. I forgot the name. But yeah. Which makes me want to play this. And I added it to my wishlist on Steam, so maybe when there's a sale and I will have enough money, I'll finally play it. Oh no. Hopefully the drill is not gonna get louder from my neighbors, but let's continue.
It should not go together, but somehow do.
If I don't talk, Mike doesn't pick it up, so that's good.
Form something different and more. Yakuza is a contradiction, and Yakuza is beautiful. These are games filled with powerful men of strength and resolve tearing off their shirts as they howl into the night sky and slam their fists into each other's bodies in explosive clashes of will and fury, where massive underworld conspiracies threaten to consume entire...
I want to say that there's a game I played which had like kind of an interesting story behind it, but it was shown just as a button mashing monstrosity, which was Azura's Wrath. I feel like it's about family, about protecting a family and stuff like that, about being mistreated and betrayed, while you just punch gods in the face with your 6 arms. That game is just, it left an impact on me.
Entire cities and destroy the lives of every citizen in it.
But
these are also games of some of the straight up goofiest shit you've ever seen. Moments when logic and reason careen into the stratosphere and the tense melodramatic crime story melts into a bizarre Japanese life simulator, to the point that depending on what part of Yakuza you see, it could either seem like a cinematic GTA-like set in Japan, or a bizarre Animal Crossing where you can kick the shit out of people.
I hope it's not going to be
it's
proper
neither,
spoilery.
It's both, and it is absolutely worth your time and attention. And to begin to explain why, I'd first like to talk about the very particular circumstances that led to Yakuza's creation, and the man behind the games, Toshihiro Nagoshi.
Okay.
2004 was a difficult year for Nagoshi, as it was for Nagoshi. 2004 was
Okay,
a
here that
difficult
right,
year for
Sunflower.
Nagoshi, as it was for many employees at
Or the
Sega. The company had been in dire straits since the disastrous surprise launch of the Sega Saturn console in 1995, and had
Yeah,
placed
that was
all their
bad.
hopes in their final console, the Sega Dreamcast, as well as its
Ooh.
killer IP, Shenmue, a
It
highly
wasn't too
ambitious
bad,
open-world title in a
as far as
time
I
when
know.
open-world titles did not exist on consoles, clocking in at a massive $47 million budget, which was at the
Ooh,
time the
yeah.
most expensive video game ever made. Shenmue
Wow.
would sell
I
well,
didn't know
but
that.
only made up for a fraction of its cost, financially crippling Sega and
Huh.
leaving the company unable to compete in the increasingly hostile console market. And so,
Okay, that's very interesting because as far as I know, Shinmu has quite a big following. I didn't know it kind of failed in, I won't say in the box office, but that's about the movies. Just sales-wise.
Sega, the former giant who had once
Because
gone
the budget
toe-to-toe
was so
with
big.
industry deity Nintendo, ceased production of the Dreamcast and declared themselves a third-party company, their only option now being to make games for the very competitors who had put them out of the console business. This caused morale at Sega
Well,
to
in order
plummet,
not to
with many
close the
staff
company
even
entirely,
questioning
so
if the company had a future in this new age of consoles.
better than nothing.
But Nagoshi, a young creative officer at Sega who had worked on titles like Daytona USA and Shenmue, saw things differently. Now that Sega were making games for other manufacturers, they could potentially
can see
sell
a bit
to
of a
a
resemblance
much wider
to the
audience.
Shenmue Yakuza.
And so it was out drinking in Tokyo's
Maybe.
red light district that the idea struck.
If I understand how
Nagoshi.
the games work,
What
right?
if they made a
Both
game
those.
aimed at adults that took place in the intense nightlife of Tokyo? And what if it had a level of detail and immersion that could let players lose themselves in an intimate open environment with a deeply engaging story set in the violent world of the Yakuza? Japanese games had a complex relationship.
Okay, before he continues, I know nothing about the Yakuza series as a whole. I don't know if they're all bad shit inside or is it just Yakuza 0. And I don't know if the same characters, like you have the same main characters, because in Yakuza 0 there are two main characters. Like this guy that's on the screen right now and they were both right here.
In the
There. The one with an eye patch and the one that's in a suit. So I'm surprised to see them in a different game because I don't know anything about it.
violent world of the Yakuza. Japanese games had a complex relationship with violent and sexual content at this point. Violence against monsters and zombies was acceptable, but not against other humans. And the topic of the Yakuza was a complete no-go, which is why upon pitching the
GTA
idea to
was
the
a thing.
higher-ups at Sega,
Maybe not in
Nagoshi
3D.
was met with immediate pushback and rejection. The
No,
idea
GTA
was
3
too
should have been
violent, the themes were too
by
adult,
2004.
it wouldn't sell to children, and it was too Japanese to sell overseas. But Nagoshi would not relent. He saw real potential here. He believed in his vision and wanted to use the more adult themes of the game.
I kind of like this progression with the world. Shut the fuck up, drill. That it was too Japanese to be released overseas. And it probably was true, but nowadays, like, more Japanese something is, the better for a lot of people. I'm not saying for everybody. So any kind of game Japan makes can find success even overseas, like Yakuza. That is, I would say even Yakuza 0, which I think is the newest game. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. Is very Japanese.
To draw
Over the
in
top
a
Japanese,
new,
I don't know.
much wider audience for Sega, and then engage that audience with a much more sincere and heartfelt story than anything the company had attempted in the
That's a
past.
big gun.
And so the day finally came when Nagoshi stood in front of Sega's upper management and declared that if Yakuza was not a success, he'd resign from the company, never to return. I bring this up because I think it's
That's a big
interesting that a
ultimatum,
series
I
about
assume.
passionate men trapped in difficult situations did itself come from a passionate man trapped in a difficult situation. And also because it shows one other thing. Nagoshi is Yakuza. And I don't just say that because he looks and dresses like a character that could appear in his games.
Okay, I'm sorry for pausing a lot. I paused like 15 times in the first 5 minutes. But it very reminds me of... and now I forgot the guy's name. The guy who created Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you're talking about the anime, well, Evangelion's universe, I guess. Who also just put his whole heart and soul into the thing because of the emotions he felt throughout his life and stuff like that. It's very reminiscent of that, I would say.
This man has been the beating heart of the series for 13 years, through
I'll try
7
not to
mainline
pause
games,
for a
7
couple of minutes at
spin-offs,
least.
and 2 remakes. And after going through enough interviews with
I said I'm not gonna pause, but I wanna know. Again.
7 mainline games.
Okay, 7 mainline games. Oh, maybe Yakuza 6 was after 0. Oh. Oh, but it seems like it's the same main character, at least one of them. And maybe only 0 has to. I don't know.
Games, 7 spin-offs.
And 0 counts as the main game title. Okay. Spin-offs. I see spin-offs with the other character, unless it's a different one. What the hell is that on the last one? Is that Fist of the North Star? Does that count as a Yakuza? Okay.
And 2 remakes.
And 2 remakes. I guess the original one and Yakuza 2. Okay.
And after going through enough interviews with him, you can begin to see how his worldview and personality has bled into these games and shaped what Yakuza has become. And one of the most prominent ways that this has happened is in Yakuza's approach to open world gaming.
Okay.
Open world games, and
What is
specifically
significant?
open world crime games, have been one of the most lucrative genres in gaming for years, and it's easy to see why. The fantasy of being let loose in a city and doing whatever you want unrestrained
But I feel
by
like there
law
aren't
or
that many of
reality
them.
is a powerful one, with many open world games allowing
At least
players to
big ones.
rampage through its streets, robbing cars, shooting police, and causing
Yeah, like
cathartic
GTA,
mayhem.
Watch Dogs, and Yakuza.
And what immediately stands out about Yakuza's open world is that it doesn't actually have that option. The
Oh.
option to commit mayhem just isn't there. Despite the fact that you play as a criminal, you can't attack people or
Criminal
commit
with a
crime.
heart of
And this
gold.
is something Nagoshi actually commented on in a lecture at Otome University, in which he was referring to the GTA series.
That's kind of similar. Again, I'm pausing a lot, but I just want to get it all in so I don't miss anything. It's similar to Assassin's Creed games, even though they're kind of fallen off the grace, but still, where you play as an assassin, but you can't really kill just civilians, because then the game will end. Kind of game over if you do that. There's a different reasoning for it than I assume in Yakuza, but still.
I simply can't bring myself to promote the emotion that killing is fun, that committing crime is fun. And what I find so interesting about this is that by eliminating the way a lot of games let us interact with their open worlds through violence, it forces us to view the world of Yakuza in an entirely different way. You're not God here, you're just another person, which forces you to engage with the city
Yeah, that's
like you would
how
if you
GTA
were actually
feels.
there. And the reason this is a positive as opposed to
Like
a
you're
limitation is the very particular
some kind of
design of
fucking
Kamurocho
deity.
itself. In a lot of open world games, the focus is on size, large open environments that stretch on seemingly forever. But Kamurocho is different.
And
Kamurocho
I
stretches
like it.
out for no more than a few city blocks. But the key here
Okay,
isn't
that is very good, because a lot of people were saying like that open world games suck because there's nothing to do in the open world because it's quite empty. And it's better to make an open world, but not make it the size of an actual fucking world. You just make it something small, something nice. And then you can just pack shit in. Like in GTA, it's mostly empty outside of cities. I feel like it's pointless.
Kamurocho's size, its density. Rather than
Yes.
having a massive world filled with
That is
empty
a good
space,
thing.
every corner of Kamurocho feels defined and realized.
I'm not saying that every
And
open
these
world game
locations
is
are filled with different activities and distractions
empty.
that make the city feel
I
dense
just heard
and
that
alive.
argument over
I've
and over
spent
again.
hours wandering around this town, completely ignoring the game's mainline story and just getting
I'm
wasted in
gonna
bars
too if
or
I'm buying
going
it.
bowling or hanging out at the batting cages.
Want
I
me
know
to
that
play it?
side activities are kind of a given when it comes to open world games, but trust me,
Or gift me
Yakuza
it on
is
Steam or
different.
something, I don't know.
It feels like there's so much love and consideration gone into
Oh, I
each
love it.
sub-activity.
Oh, there are
and
so many
side
Max
quests.
Orton
For
didn't
example,
mention.
check out
Oh.
something that happened
Unless
when I
it's
was
not in Zero.
exploring the seaside town of Onamichi in Yakuza 6. And by pure
wanna
chance,
go
I
to
wandered down to
Japan.
the pier and got talking to this cool little fishing girl, which in turn led to a side story about their family business, which in turn ended up unlocking an entire full-blown new game mode, with new art assets, new gameplay mechanics, new environmental design, cutscenes and boss fights, including this giant squid, which I shit you not, had his own theme music. And if I hadn't wandered down to the pier, I could have completely
I was missing
missed
out
this
so
part of the
much.
game, like I did in Yakuza 0, when only after finishing it did I discover that there was an entire sub-game built around pocket stock car
Like, okay,
racing.
let me say this. Sorry for pausing. But Yakuza is not popular in Russia at all. Like, GTA, you can get GTA however you want, but Yakuza, and I mean, well, like you could when there were discs sold and shops like that. You could find GTA in pretty much every store, but I doubt you could find Yakuza. Even if I knew about the game, if I tried to find it, I wouldn't been able to, at least in my city, because it's very small. But still, I fucking wish I didn't play GTA. You can, like, what I want to say as well, that you can talk to anybody about GTA, and like my friend, my best friend, his favorite, well, I don't think it's just his favorite game, but he enjoyed GTA San Andreas like a hell of a lot. He kind of was excited for remasters, but then when the trailer came out, they looked like shit, and he got sad. But you can talk to anybody who plays games about GTA games in Russia, but you can't do that about Yakuza games. I actually, I don't think there's a actual official translation to Russian, which is a big deal because a lot of people don't speak English, or definitely not Japanese. So it impacted it here by quite a lot, so I missed out on it as well. But I wish I could, like, I wish I never played, let's say, San Andreas, but I played Yakuza. I don't know, what's in comparison, let's say 4, something like that. Never played GTA 5, but play Yakuza 5. No, actually, then it would be 0 or 6. You got what I mean.
With its own gameplay mechanics, progression
I've
systems,
recorded for
customization
17
features, and
minutes, 8 minutes
storyline.
of this video.
And there are multiple of these layered, intricate sub-games per title, like Yakuza 0's Host Club side quest with an entire game built around owning and operating a successful host club, or the dojo management sim from Yakuza 4, or the fishing
I'm very
from
interested
Yakuza
in
3,
host clubs.
or the baseball side activity of
After
Yakuza 6,
Sidog
in which
VA's
Kiryu
video.
has to
Oh, I love
scout
that.
and manage an entire baseball
I love
team
that
that
cutscene where he
essentially
throws
turns
the bat.
story of Yakuza into a shonen sports anime. It's also through these side activities that the game's personality really starts to shine. Everything in Yakuza's world has this overblown, overdramatic, bombastic quality to it. Even something as minor as
this is about the
picking
whole
up a
series,
telephone
okay.
becomes this big, extravagant show of will.
Oh, yeah.
Like, seriously, check this out.
Yes. I love this scene. See what I mean? Mush mush.
Mush mush.
Yakuza revels in the
I love
irreverence.
that. I
It delights
fucking-
in depicting serious
Oh.
men in ridiculous situations. What all this combines into is an open world that is at once immersive and hilarious. You never
I'm
really
just sad
know
I
what
missed
you're going
out
to
on
see
all
on the
this.
streets of Kamurocho, and that's kind of the joy of it.
And catching up
And it's
is a very
fun,
difficult
and it's
game.
weird and it's exciting, but it also serves another purpose, and that's how the
Kinda
game's
same
open
with Final
world
Fantasy
is
to me,
used
but
to flesh out
not
its
as much.
main character, Kiryu Kazuma. Kiryu is known as the Dragon of Dojima, a respected and feared high-ranking member of the Yakuza, his stoic, icy demeanor being surpassed only by his fiery ferocity in combat. And that's
Okay.
the fun of playing as Kiryu. He is a fantasy,
A
a
brawler.
respected, powerful, very attractive fantasy. And the
I think you should have said it's a power fantasy, but specifically because
game's
sheer
combat
strength
does a great
of a
job
character.
of making you feel like that.
Sorry for
Combat
pausing
occurs
again.
either randomly out in the open world or in the game's more linear story sections. And while the fighting isn't especially deep, it does capture the feeling of being a legitimate Yakuza badass, as you take on scores of foes while building up meter and obliterating enemies with Kiryu's creative and brutal
I feel like
actions.
fighting itself,
This,
at least
combined
how
with
it
how he's
looks,
framed in the
is the
story,
weakest
makes
part of the
Kiryu
game.
feel like this indestructible Yakuza demon.
You can tell me if I'm
And
wrong
the
because I've
final
never played
aspect
them, I
of
don't know.
Yakuza's open
Just
world
the
I'd like to
looks.
talk about
A bit
is how
clumsy,
it takes that
except for
demon
the
and
animations.
makes him feel human. By eliminating the ability to cause violence and
finishing moves.
mayhem, the game ends up sidestepping one of open world gaming's biggest problems. A lot of open world games want to give us as much freedom as possible, while also asking us to empathize with its protagonist and story. Which is a problem if in between story sequences
Yes.
we're using that
I
same
wanted to say
character
that.
avatar
Good
to
thing, I
run
don't have
down
to pause it.
pedestrians,
Yes.
which creates this immersion-breaking separation between the player's actions.
Just
and
like,
the
oh no,
game's
you
narrative.
vanished. Oh no, cops
But
after
in
you. But in the
Yakuza,
narrative, it makes
that
no sense.
separation doesn't exist. While
Yeah,
Kiryu will defend
that's
himself
good.
if attacked, he would never attack an innocent person, therefore, that option is not available to us. But this also means that every action we can take is in turn something Kiryu would actually do. And it's here we start to see a very different side of the Dragon of Dojima. Kiryu is this indestructible Yakuza badass, but he's also someone who just likes to relax in his local cat cafe, who gets way too into stock car racing, enjoys a passionate round of karaoke, and who hangs out in chat rooms while typing like an idiot. But where the game
Wait, that was
takes
a
this
real
further
video of a
is in
woman.
its
That-
many sub-stories,
that surprised
in which
me.
Kiryu meets one of the city's usually pretty strange inhabitants and helps them with some personal issue they face. And rather than just feeling like standard side quests, these are actually a lot of fun. Either playing up Kiryu's awkwardness by dropping him in an uncomfortable situation, or
Oh, it's
just
a diaper
being
cafe.
genuinely heartfelt.
Yeah.
And it's through these activities we get to know the goofier, more intimate side of the hardened Yakuza legend. And it humanizes Kiryu in a way that only video games can really do, as by exploring and engaging in Yakuza's open world, you're coming to know the subtleties of Kiryu's personality.
Yeah, will be nugget.
The other advantage
Ah,
of this is that when we do actually
That's a
engage
future
with the
look
game's
into that chicken.
story, we're already invested because
A
we
look into the
already
future of the
care
chicken.
about Kiryu. Most of the plots of the Yakuza games follow the same basic
I shouldn't
formula.
read subtitles, not
Kiryu, or
spoil
one of the
myself
other series
more.
protagonists, becomes involved in some massive Yakuza conspiracy over either land, money, or in several cases, a small child. And from here, we watch them punch their way through entire buildings of enemy Yakuza, usually culminating in a scene where two men derobe and wrestle until one stops being evil. The quality of the plots varies a lot from game to game, but one thing that stays consistent is the level of visual presentation. The Yakuza games, and specifically their cutscenes, are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Even on older hardware, everything from the character models to the facial animation to the camera work and lighting are leveraged.
Like
to
if you
convey
show me screenshots of multiple games and one of them will be Yakuza, I probably will tell which one is Yakuza. Because even it's not too stylistic. It still kind of tries to be photorealistic in some way, but still something tells me I can immediately tell, especially if it's a little animation more than just
For
screenshot.
example, check out this scene from Yakuza 6 where Kiryu meets new character Somiya. And watch how much drama the game squeezes from this brief exchange and how much it says about their relationship conveyed purely through editing, shot composition, and sound design.
I'm invested. I know nothing what's going on, but I'm invested. He would have walked like right through him if he didn't move.
This scene shows something else also that's core to this series, and that is the conflict that forms between Kiryu and the other members of the Yakuza. And that's a conflict rooted deep in Kiryu as a character. What I think is so interesting about Kiryu as a protagonist of these games specifically is that the same philosophy that drives the gameplay of Yakuza's open world is also what drives Kiryu as a character. And if the idea of being opposed to crime and murder sounds like a conflict of interest for a professional criminal Yakuza, oh boy is it. There is in Japan this super romantic idea of what being a Yakuza is. Despite the fact that they are a known criminal organization, public opinion on the Yakuza is mixed, with many people seeing them as criminals who keep crime clean, who keep more volatile groups like the Chinese triads in check. And a big part of
Okay.
this is down to the Yakuza's own efforts. They frequently try and position themselves as a positive to Japanese society, doing things like contributing to the relief effort in Japan in times of crisis, as they did in the 2011 triple meltdown of the Fukushima power plants, or the
Oh,
1995 Kobe earthquake. Actions like this
shit.
mean it's very easy to get a romanticized view of the Yakuza, to see them as modern-day
Okay.
outlaw samurais.
I actually didn't know that
whose
they
means
did
may
any
be
of that.
questionable, but
I know nothing
ultimately have
about
Japan's
real
best
life
interests
Yakuza.
at heart. This is the traditional, idealized view of the Yakuza, and this view is shared by Kiryu. To him, being a Yakuza means being strong enough to stand outside society's laws and forge your own
Oh,
path through
even
life,
spit
and
is
having the will and
high
conviction
quality.
to do what only you believe is right. The problem with this ideology, though, can be revealed with a quick Wikipedia search. The Yakuza have been involved in everything from human trafficking to dogfighting to high-level government corruption to even open gang warfare that spilled onto the streets of Tokyo with innocent lives lost in
What
the
are they wearing?
crossfire. This is the violent reality of the
suit?
Yakuza,
Hmm.
and it's that violence that is embodied by many of the characters surrounding Kiryu. Kiryu is at heart a good person, but he's part of an organization that surrounds him
Yeah.
with evil people. Every
That's what I
character
get
in
from him
Yakuza has
immediately.
their own distinctive worldview and philosophy on what it means to be a Yakuza, and it's these ideologies that drive Yakuza's more brutal encounters and what keeps these conflicts so interesting. I want to return to Someya for a moment. If that cutscene from earlier wasn't indication enough, there comes a point in the story where Someya and Kiryu have a showdown.
Yeah,
Showdowns in Yakuza
that would
tend
make
to
sense.
coincide with the major beats of the story, and are usually preceded by both characters ripping off their suit jackets and bearing their tattoos before beating
Yeah,
the living soul out of
I feel like that
one
could be in
another.
honor
And the tattoos
of your
specifically
opponent.
are important. These are the physical embodiment of what it is to be a Yakuza to these characters, with each carrying personal significance to the character that bears them. Like, take Kiryu's dragon, for example. The dragon is the undefeatable Lord of the Heavens, expressing his
Shut
own
up,
strength and commitment to his own freedom. Or Nishiki's koi, the fish of legend that swims up the waterfall in order to one day become a dragon, marking his desire to surpass Kiryu.
I know that legend.
These are the marks of the Yakuza way of life and the ultimate dedication to its values. Which is why it's so shocking when Someya does not have one. He sees the tattoos as an outdated practice of a bygone era, and
That also
he
makes
is
sense.
the cold new generation of Yakuza, divorced from the idea of tradition and honor, focused only on acquiring power. This frames the ensuing battle between the two as less a straight-up fistfight and more a clash of ideologies. Even completely divorced from the plot, you can see how these two characters would take issue with each
Also,
other. With Kiryu's
Kiryu doesn't take the jacket off in this fight. I guess not to show the tattoo for somebody who, in his eyes, maybe doesn't deserve it.
idealized version of what it means to be a Yakuza
Sorry for pausing
against Somia's
100
cold,
times.
emotionless reality of what being a modern-day Yakuza actually is. It's setups like this that gives these violent brawls a real emotional weight, as each character struggles to prove their resolve and justify their own way of living through sheer physical force. And they're brutal and they're exciting, but there's also a kind of sadness to them too, and one that grows more prominent as the games go on. Later on in Yakuza, the constant fighting starts to take its toll on Kiryu, who eventually becomes disillusioned with his underworld lifestyle and decides to walk away and start a new peaceful existence with his adoptive daughter, Haruka. But there's an issue there. Kiryu can't help himself. To him,
Yeah, something's
being
gonna bring him back.
Yakuza is something you're born as and not something you become, and he just doesn't fit into any other corner of society. And so over and over he gets drawn back into these conflicts, trapped between his former life as a Yakuza and his desire to live a peaceful existence with his family. And this is the struggle that plays out over the course of the series. I feel like at this point it's worth noting that we've gone from talking about goofy octopus hunting hijinks to a story where broken people repeatedly crash into each other in a failed attempt to make progress. Yakuza is tragic and hilarious, but life is tragic and hilarious. And it's when
Sure
these
is.
two
Stop
sides
moving,
begin to
screen.
I want to talk about a moment from Yakuza 0 that really hammered this home for me. It's the point in the story where Kiryu has gotten himself into a lot of trouble, to the point that his best friend and former Yakuza running buddy Nishiki takes Kiryu on a car ride so the two can escape Camera Ocho and let the heat die down. Nishiki and Kiryu
Is that the guy
grew up
with
in
the
the
eye
same
patch or is it a different
orphanage and
one?
have become kind of brothers to each other. And throughout Zero, you've explored the town with Nishiki, you've gone drinking with him, he's helped you pick out suits, and for a while, the two friends just drive in a comfortable silence. Until they stop at, well, nowhere. Kiryu gets out of the car and Nishiki offers him a cigarette, which Kiryu takes a slow, steady inhale of, before finally asking Nishiki what exactly he's doing. And Nishiki, through tears, tells Kiryu that this is the kindest, most painless end Kiryu could hope to meet at this point. Nishiki doesn't want to kill Kiryu, but he also knows the far more sadistic end Kiryu will meet at the hands of the lieutenants. And it's a real heartbreaker of a scene, delivered with all the mood and weight these games are so adept at. But as I was watching it, all I could think about was this really stupid moment from earlier in the game, when Nishiki and Kiryu were singing this dumb karaoke track and the whole scene transformed into this 80s hair metal style music video.
Oh, hell yeah.
And how fun and weird and silly it seemed at the time. And how now in hindsight that moment feels nearly obscenely tragic. How the reality of who they are and what they do has caught up with them, and it feels real and
how life can change on a
and
dime,
sad.
I would say.
And it's a moment that sums up why I love these games. By taking joy in the little moments and letting us just get to know these characters through its silly open worlds and side quests, it makes the journey they ultimately go on and the hardships they face feel oddly real and human. And I think that's really cool. I think that's something to be celebrated. I hope if I've done my job right here, you're at least a little intrigued about this series, which
more than a little,
play
much
and
more than a
where you
little.
should start.
It's a great job on
But
the
the
series.
truth is, I think all this series is worth playing. Maybe not one after the other,
like I
unless
mean,
you have
talking about the
300 hours to
series.
kill. But if you need a place to start, I'd really recommend Yakuza 0. The game is a prequel taking place 20 years before the events of Yakuza 1, and it has arguably the best story, combat, and gameplay systems out of any of the games. But
better than
possibly
6?
its biggest
Unless 6
selling
came out
point
before it,
is
I don't
its second playable character, Goro Majima. Majima is Kiryu's
Oh,
psychotic
yeah.
and dangerous rival, eventually turned ally of the series, and he's this kind of fascinating wildcard in the world of Yakuza, the total opposite
different
of
guys with a
Kiryu in
friend.
nearly every respect.
I
And so
think that,
imagine
but
my shock when the
just long
opening
hair.
of Yakuza 0 depicts my eye-patched brethren as a diligent, buttoned-up manager of a successful cabaret club, and watching the waterfalls of shit he has to wade through over the course of the game, and how it gradually transforms him into the feared mad dog of Shimano he becomes for the rest of the series. In a weirdly powerful and sad story
Oh yeah, it's a
about just
prequel.
living life on your own terms and being who you've got to be. One that had me weeping like
an
a
Oni
small
on
weak
the back.
child by the time the credits
Demon.
rolled. The other advantage of starting at 0 is that this will also position you perfectly at the start of Kiryu's story, and from here you can watch him go from a young, inexperienced Yakuza thug in a cheap suit to the legendary Dragon of Dojima, to just a man trying to outrun his past and struggling to start again.
Also, I want to know, did the
In a
story
story
end?
that spans
Maybe it
7
will be said in
games
the video.
and 30 years,
Just
over the
question
course of
pop up.
which it never stops feeling like it has something to say. In a narrative that shows life at its most small scale and silly, as well as its most brutal and tragic. And the oddly human feeling that comes when those two worlds overlap. And I think something that unique and special could only come from a single passionate vision. Which is why I'm so glad that Nagoshi fought through Sega's dark age and made his vision a reality. And, of course, why you should play Yakuza. Hey, thanks for watching the video. I really hope you had a good time. I got a little announcement, and that is that I'm going to be a special guest at this year's Con Bravo in Toronto. So if you're in the area, do come on down and we'll do photos.
This year is
signings, and it'll be a
2018.
good time.
I see.
I want to give a huge shout out to the Wolfpack over on Patreon.
Okay. Okay, just Patreon stuff. This was an amazing video. I'm sorry that I made it 10 minutes longer. But I don't know, it resonates with me when it's a documentary done well on something. I want to talk about some stuff I can compare it as well, or just describe it, so I'm sorry for that, but if you enjoyed this, at least a little bit, at least if you made it to the end, I'm glad. Even if you hated it all the way through, you still made it to the end. Something got you here. Thank you for that, by the way. And yeah, the video will probably come out tomorrow because I got paid through the donation link in the description below. But it will be today on the Patreon. And that's how every fucking... That fucking came out of nowhere. I just want to say every video from now on fucking was unnecessary. Whatever. Anyway, again, thank you anybody who watched this. I appreciate it a lot, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye. Have a great life. Because one of us has to.